Hi there, I'm Drew Badger, the world's #1 English fluency guide, and in this video I'm going to be talking about phrasal verbs, but also about maybe an important lesson for you as you're learning and remembering things, no matter really what you're practicing. In this video, actually, I wanted to talk about tools and talking about some of the phrasal verbs that we use with that. There were quite a few things I wanted to cover, but more than the actual tools themselves, this idea of how you remember things is much more important. So I'm always trying to get you to think about the deeper, like the things at the bottom. If you can master these things, like how to learn, how to practice, how to review things, how to find people to practice speaking with, if you can master these things at the bottom, this stuff at the top becomes much easier to learn. So if you understand how to learn vocabulary, then you can learn a ton of vocabulary really quickly. So let's say this is a screwdriver, and a screwdriver is a tool that drives screws. It's a pretty interesting, pretty simple name, right? So it's screwdriver, takes those little screws that have the little line on the outside, and we screw something into some wood. For maybe some people that don't know the difference, a nail is something that does not have the line around the outside, and you hit that with a hammer. So you have a nail sticking up and you hit, and you hit the nail into the wood. But with a screwdriver, you're actually taking a screw and screwing something into the wood. So screw into, to screw into. And this is our first phrasal verb, to screw something into something else. Now, when you're talking about taking a screw out of something, this is to unscrew something, but I'm turning the screw and making it go up. So screw up becomes something where we're talking about removing a screw or making something loose. Now, this is the important part about the video, where this is kind of a story here, where I want you to not be shy about creating your own stories to help you remember things. So as an example, many words, maybe they have a specific origin, like I was explaining in a previous video. All the tools that I have now are all digital, so they don't have little buttons and knobs and other things like that. But old radios, if you're looking at something electronic, or like an old TV, you would have a button on there, or you would have like a dial, typically, that turns the television on, and this is where we get the phrasal verb to turn something on. So again, all of these things, just like I explained before in a previous video, where I was giving examples of the telephone and why we talk about hanging the telephone up or dialing the telephone, because even though we don't physically push buttons on that anymore, we're still kind of using that same idea. So often the history of these things becomes really important. But the important thing here is that even if you don't know what the physical origin of something might be, you can create your own story about that to help you remember it. So screw up is a really popular, very common phrasal verb that native speakers use when they're talking about making a mistake. Oh, I was trying to ask that girl out and I couldn't speak. I was I got really nervous and I screwed up the situation. So I screwed up my chance, or I missed my chance. I made a mistake and I wasn't able to ask that girl out. So I wasn't able to get a date. Or you can screw up something at work. I was making some projects and then I spilled some ink all over them and I screwed up the whole situation. So I screwed something up. Now, when you listen to something like this, and again, try to first look at the verb. Okay, we're screwing something and then we're screwing something up. Like what does that really mean? And again, it's really for you to create your own story to help you connect this and really make that idea in your mind. So don't wait for a teacher or a native speaker to explain something. Just like myself, if I'm learning something in Japanese, I will often make a story in my mind to help me remember something that even might not be exactly what a Japanese person might do, but it still achieves the same result. And so the getting the result, which is remembering what that thing is the most important part. So it doesn't really matter if you take a different direction to that than somebody else. If you can remember the word and use it confidently when you're speaking, that's the whole point. That's the whole goal. So don't really worry about how you get there. So as an example, maybe we have something like screw, and I'm talking about screw up. Now, how do I, if I think about the idea of screwing something up as making a mistake, maybe I create a story in my mind of I'm unscrewing something, so I'm screwing something up and I'm making that thing looser. So if I've got maybe two pieces of metal together and I am holding them together with one screw, if I screw that thing up, then they start, moving apart. And then if I remove the screw completely, then they come apart. It becomes a problem. Maybe I'm making a mistake. So in this way, I'm creating a story about where a phrasal verb might come from. So even if there's no logical reason, maybe like many years ago, people in the past, they just created, okay, we're going to call this screwing something up, even though there's no real logical reason to do that. But you create that logical connection in your mind, and that's what helps your understanding develop, especially for using phrasal verbs in this way. So for things like the television, where you can either see the history of it, like we spoke about in a previous video, where I'm turning the television on. I'm turning it on. Even though now we push a button to turn the television on, maybe on a remote control or something else. Or the same thing with volume. There used to be a dial on the telephone where you would turn up. You would turn up the volume or turn down the volume. So that's why now people say, hey, could you turn it down? Could you turn it down or could you turn it up? They're talking about raising the volume or lowering the volume. But we don't say, hey, could you slide the volume up? We don't use that, even though that's maybe what we're using now. And the reason is because we already have this idea in our mind, and it's really difficult to remove that idea once we're creating, even if we have maybe some other way of explaining that. The most important point of this lesson is to think about creating your own story, so that way if you have a problem maybe remembering how something works, or you don't quite understand why a native speaker would use something in a particular way, the first thing you should do is try to think about the physical origin of that phrasal verb. And the second one is if you maybe can't think of one, or you ask a native speaker and they can't give you a good, reason or story, then make up your own. You can connect your own ideas with whatever the meaning of that situation is. And it's much more important to connect the meaning of things in English than it is to try to take maybe something in your native language and connect that with English. So do not translate. Take the time. It's really important, and it will help you use these things in conversations when you're speaking without having to think about it if you create these stories in your mind in English. So just try to make even a simple connection. So to screw something up, I'm maybe loosening something and it doesn't go well. I'm making a mistake somehow. If you have enjoyed this video, do click that like button and be sure to subscribe if you are not already a subscriber of the EnglishAnyone.com YouTube channel. I look forward to helping you improve even more. And also, if you have problems with your English, and it could be learning phrasal verbs, so this kind of vocabulary, if you struggle with having to think about grammar rules or tenses, or even if you just have problems understanding what people say. Maybe you're listening to me and you can understand my lessons quite well because I'm speaking quite clearly, but maybe you have trouble understanding other people in maybe movies or regular conversations. Click on the link in this video and take our English fluency quiz. This will give you a couple of opportunities to learn more about what your specific problem is. Even if you have multiple problems, really the key to improving is to focus on your weakest English fluency habit so that you can become a fluent speaker much faster. So really, this is probably the most important piece of information, even more important than this idea about stories. But when you're thinking about improving your English, it's not about learning more vocabulary. You want to develop the right habits, and if you do this, all of the vocabulary stuff comes naturally, and it comes very quickly. Anyway, do click on the link in this video if you're interested in taking this free quiz that will help you, give you specific personal advice to help you improve, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye-bye.